Good stuff. How you doing, friends? Take your Bibles and go with me to the book of Galatians. We'll be in chapter 6, and I'm going to let you actually start without me. So Galatians 6, 1 through 10, you can start reading it in your YouVersion or in your scriptures there, because we're going to get to that in just a moment. Let me give you a quick recap. If you've kind of just come into this series, as Glenn was saying, and we've been in this for about 4 weeks now, it's impossible to get through the deep, rich theology that is a part of the book of Galatians in 4 weeks. We've been looking at certain themes and diving into those, and it's grace. It's grace, 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 and grace. There, we summed it up. Because that's really the call of the whole entire book. In fact, maybe Galatians 5:1 could be the thesis statement of the entire book. He says it's for freedom. It's for freedom that Christ has set you free. You stand firm then, and don't be taken back into this yoke of slavery, of legalism, of trying to live up to God's grace, or try to live up out of your own merit or out of your own morality, or just because you'll fail. What Paul is saying. The law is put there to say, look, you can't reach it. It's impossible to be as holy as God is. But what Paul says elsewhere, it's a gift. It's a gift given to you. Enjoy it. It's grace, grace, grace. It's freedom, freedom, freedom. And so for 5 chapters, he's hammering home this reality, because he's writing to a group of people that were struggling with it. They'd gotten sideways and said this whole grace thing is Jesus plus some other things. It's Jesus plus my effort, plus my energy, my discipline, and all those things. And does God want us to follow after him in obedience? Yes, but it's not to earn anything. It's out of a love relationship. And it's this notion of saying it's grace, 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 freedom, freedom, freedom. And so over and over, Paul is emphasizing, it's not living up to the grace that you've been given. You can't. It's about living out of that grace. Remember we looked at that? It's that your identity has forever been changed as a son and daughter of the God Most High because of your faith in Christ. And that's it. Jesus plus nothing equals that. It's this faith that you've been given. And you're to stay rooted in that grace. Don't let legalism come after you and try to come up behind you and put you into this slavery again, because that will be a part of the journey. And what he's saying is, no, you stay rooted in grace. And as you are, you'll be nourished through the Spirit, and you'll begin to overflow with love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and all these things that he lists there in chapter 5. And he says, look, that's how it's got to be expressed. It's not something to be hoarded or to kept to yourself or just acquire more and more for you. It's got to find expression outwards. And so for 5 chapters, Paul is hammering home grace, 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 and what? Grace, freedom, freedom, freedom. It's like for 5 chapters, he's trying to nail that home. And then in chapter 6, he says, go do it. Just go do it. How many of you drove here? I'm assuming you took a test at some point. That you studied the vehicle, you studied a car, you studied this idea of driving, you saw a car, maybe you rode in a car at some point, and then somewhere along the line you actually had to take a test to learn how to drive. The worst tests are with your parents though, right? It's another sermon. But you take a test, and then the only thing left to do is what? Just go drive. Just go drive the car. There's nothing like just driving the car. You teach your kids how to ride a bike. And it's, okay, here's a bike, and you show them a picture of a bike, and you show them, here's what the bike looks like, and here's how you sit on the bike, and here's how you work a bike, and all those kind of things, and they sit on a bike, but there's nothing like just going and riding the bike. And so for 5 chapters, Paul is saying, here's what life of grace is, and here's what it's not, and here's what it is, and it just describe it and paint. Now go do it. My favorite picture this last spring here is Callista, our youngest, and this is her getting her bike at 6 years old. And she had hand-me-down bikes and all that kind of stuff. We said, no, you need your own bike, okay? So she gets her bike, and she's just sitting on it. And that's wonderful, and that's nice, but that's not what a bike's made to do, right? Just sit in the living room? No. You got to go ride it. And look at this middle picture. Isn't that not just joy? Doesn't that just warm your heart? It's like she gets it. She just rides the bike. And all the joy and the adventure that comes with that as she takes off up the road. Now, if there was a fourth picture over here, you would see her coming down the hill, and that didn't end too well. In fact, I didn't snap the picture because I actually had to help her up because it just wiped out into our rocks and in the driveway there, and we stopped riding the bike at that moment. But it's this notion, well, doesn't that happen in our life at times? We just get going too fast, and we just crash. And maybe all throughout Galatians, Paul is saying, look, just now go do it. And if you crash, just get up again and go do it. Just keep in step with the Spirit. Just go do this. Live this life that you've been called to live. Awaken to it. And then step into it. Understand what it is. And in Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 through 10, if you're not careful, you could read those verses as a list. You could read them as, well, here's the things I need to go do. But it's deeper than that. And that's what I want to lean into a little bit today. I want us to see a pattern that's developing here. Because there's a pattern and a rhythm that you see in verses 1 through 10. And then I want to unpack some of the last part of that for the rest of this talk. So real quickly, this pattern that's developing is a both and type of pattern. It's as if you were, okay, here's the bike, now go ride the bike of grace. There's a couple pedals that go with it to make it work, okay? And there's a couple things that need to be a part of it. And part of it is this mutual connection and accountability one to another. He says in the end of verse 10, you're the family of God. Elsewhere, he says you're the household of believers, your brothers and sisters. So look down your row right now. Wave to your brothers and sisters. Go ahead, do it. It's not awkward if everyone does it. And so you're waving to your brothers and sisters. And the beautiful part of this is you don't have to actually know all their names, and you don't have to buy them a Christmas present, and that's nice. But you are connected into a family. You belong to the family of God. That's what Paul is saying, is you have this mutual connection that in some way that in and through Christ, I am connected to you and you are connected to me. And that's how it works. And Paul is saying you are part of this family of God and you are to have this mutual connection and accountability with one another because you're gonna need it as you go through. But it's not just that. It's also you have, as an individual, you have some individual responsibility and some followership of Jesus, that part of this rides on you also. And in our Western world, so much, we want to spend so much of our thought on this part. It's about me and God, me and God, me and God, me and God. And that's true. Paul's going to get at that and this pattern that we begin to see emerge, but it's not just that. It's this idea that we have a mutual connection and accountability one to another. So let me just roll through this. You'll see this rhythm kind of happen. I won't read all the verses, but in verse 1, you kind of see this idea. Hey, look, if one of you gets sideways in this grace thing, then those of you who are spiritual, you go restore them. And you go restore them how? With gentleness. You go bring them back because you have connection one to another. And you need that. And you need to reach out to those around you. But it's, hey, as you go, you have an individual responsibility. Don't be caught up in it. Don't you bend to temptation also. So you have this mutual connection of which you're to interact and relate with, but it's also this call for you to stand strong, that you are to carry one another's burdens, that as you are mutually connected and accountable to one to another, that you have this burden. In fact, in Greek, it's literally this burden that's too heavy for one person to bear. It's too much. It weighs them down. It's impossible to move forward with that because it's too much for you. Let me ask you ever been there? When it's just maybe a circumstance or a situation in life for you, and it's too much. And what do you need in that moment? You need to not be alone. You need a group of people that you're connected to, a family, Paul would say. That is, as brothers and sisters who are committed and connected through Christ alone, we have this connection that we are to help one another and we are to carry one another's burdens. He goes on, but don't think of yourself too highly. Test your own actions. Carry your own weight. In Greek there, it's literally to carry your own burden or load, your scriptures might say. It's this idea of like a backpack size. It's you have responsibility for yourself and for your own things. And for your followership of Jesus Christ, you've got to own that. And so he goes on, take care of those in leadership above you. And so this connection as the church, you're to move as a unit and you're to care for one another. Verse 7, but hey, you got to choose. You're going to have this battle. You're going to have this struggle that goes on between the sin nature and between walking in the Spirit. And you've got to own that individually. And then verse 9 and verse 10, because look, you have this connection that you're to respond as you have opportunity. We'll look at that in just a little bit. But you see this rhythm, this pattern, that it's both individual and this mutual connection. It's both we, us, and me, individual. There's the both and, not either or. How many of you have been to a restaurant? When you're at the restaurant, they come around, they say, would you like a soup or salad? Would you like this side or this side, right? You get to choose the different sides. But then you wise up and you go to Golden Corral. Let's just pause for a moment. Smell the rolls. It's too close to lunch, sorry. And at Golden Corral, it's not either or. It's both and. And. It's not either or. You don't have to choose. It's you get it all. And maybe that's what Paul is kind of getting at here. He says, as you keep in step with the Spirit, as you live rooted in this grace that you didn't have to earn and you don't have to work at it to keep it, you just get it. It's a gift. Enjoy it. Let it well up within you to overflow to others. And as you do, you are to go now and live grace. Live it. And you're going to do that as you're mutually connected and accountable one to another because you're going to need each other. There's going to come those moments where you're going to have to reach out to help people around you that are struggling, that are brothers and sisters in the faith that just need you. And we see that all over in community groups around here. I see that in action all the time. And you know what? You're going to have to be on the receiving end of that sometimes. We don't like to admit that, do we? We don't like to admit that we need help because it's a struggle. And we want to build this veneer and this wall that says, no, I'm good. But the truth is, if it was just you and me in the room and we could be really honest with each other, that you would probably come to a place where you've said, man, I just need people. I need friends that are just in it with me. And maybe what Paul's getting at is that's what you're to have. This both and. You're going to have that mutual connection and accountability, and you've got to own some things for yourself too. In your own followership of Jesus Christ, you've got to own that. But it's not just you. It's both and. Maybe the Christian faith and the journey of that is not this Lone Ranger solo adventure that sometimes we make it out to be, but nor is it this codependent coattail ride along. It's both and. That's what Paul is saying. As you go live this grace, you're going to need mutual connection one to another, and you're going to need to be that connection one to another. But you know what? You're going to have to also own some of this followership of Jesus Christ and growing and maturing in him. That's a part of your journey too, and you need both. It's beginning to see that we begin to see. Maybe I love verse 2 in here. He talks about carrying one another's burdens. In this way, you fulfill the law of Christ. Now, isn't that interesting? The law of Christ. Hasn't Paul spent 5 chapters railing against the law? Does anyone else find that interesting? I find that fascinating. The law of Christ, what is he saying here? Maybe what Paul is getting at is just be like Jesus. Maybe the law of Christ is just be like Jesus. Live the great commandment. Live what he taught and what he modeled and what he showed and how he lived his life. It's the royal law of love, James talks about. It's what Jesus said to his followers. You're to love one another. And as you do that, you know what's going to happen? Everyone's going to know you're my follower. As you love one another. This law of love, maybe he was trying to catch their attention. Hey, you think I'm railing against the law? Hey, whoa, let me kind of recast and reframe what I mean by law. And it's just live like Jesus. Live like him. You know why? Because he's lived for you. and he died for you, and he was raised back to life to empower your living, that you might keep in step with the Spirit. And as you're rooted in grace, it's going to overflow. You carry one another's burdens. They're going to need that. And in so doing, you're going to fulfill the law of Christ. But it's also, verse 5, it's this, okay, you got to carry your own load. And so it's this mutual connection, and it's this idea of individual responsibility and followership of that. He goes on, verse 7. He says, look, don't be deceived. God cannot be mocked. It's a strong language. You can't mock God. You're not going to pull one over on God. A man reaps what he sows. The one who sows to please the sinful nature, from that nature will reap destruction. The one who sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap life, and ultimately eternal life. A man reaps what he sows. Now, I don't know much about gardening. Andy's got a garden. Andy, I don't know if you're in here. He's got a great garden. You know what happens when you plant tomatoes and you take care of them and you water them? Guess what grows there? Not a sharp crowd. Tomatoes, yes, tomatoes. You plant tomatoes, grows tomatoes. It's amazing how that happens. And that's the only part I know about gardening. And what Paul is saying is, look here, you're going to have this tug of war. Remember, he talked about that in chapter 5. This sinful nature is going to crave against what living in the Spirit is. And you're going to have this tug of war going on. And you've got to choose individually. You've got to choose what you're going to live with. And I'm telling you, you just stay rooted in grace and you live out of the Spirit's power. Ask him to empower your living. And you'll love the harvest that you get. But you're going to have this tug of war going on. I have a good friend, Bill, who has a farm up north a little bit, and he plants, he kind of grows alfalfa there, wheat there. You know what he plants in the ground to get that? Take a wild guess. Seeds. Yes, someone's really smart. Alfalfa and wheat. That's what he puts there, and that's what grows there. And so there's this notion, Bill, I see you. Hey, Bill. There's this notion of just what you sow, you're going to reap. And he's saying, look, don't lose sight of that. That's part of that individual. So it's both mutual and this individual. And then he kind of makes his way into verse 9 and 10. I want to spend the rest of our time kind of unpacking this, because he says an amazing thing here. And he gives us a principle to live by that I think is really freeing. Because this is about grace, 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 freedom, freedom, freedom. Now go do it. Go live it. Live that mutually connected, and live that on your own too, in your own strength. And in verse 9, he says this. Verse 9, he says, don't grow weary. There we go. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we'll reap a harvest if we do not give up. Let us not become weary. Anyone ever been there? Just weary, worn out, tired. Paul's saying, look, don't become weary of doing good. You've been given this gift, and you are to let it overflow. And don't grow weary in doing good. Don't get so tired. He says he's writing to a group of people who are just facing opposition all the time. It's Jesus plus so many other things. And he's saying, look, don't grow weary in doing good. I know you're facing opposition. Don't let that opposition squelch you and you shut everything out. You don't grow weary of doing good. You keep at it, because it will produce a harvest down the road. And we can grow weary in a couple different ways. One is we can go to one extreme where we try to be all things to all people. We try to do everything for everyone. How many of you people pleasers are here? That's me. That's me. Just brutally honest. That's me. And I've been there, trying to do everything for everyone. And you know the truth of that is I end up doing nothing for anyone, because I'm spread so thin, trying to do so many things. It's always another phone call, always another email, always another conversation, always, always, always. And yet I try to go please everyone. And Paul's saying, look, if you take off down that road, you're going to be worn out. You're trying to overdo. But you can also get overwhelmed. True, right? In fact, what happens when you get overwhelmed? In fact, even in our culture, on awareness level, we can become overwhelmed. You know, it used to happen when you wanted to know about someone's life, you actually had to call them. Amazing concept. I remember it in my childhood. I'm a little older than that. But now with Facebook and Twitter and everything out there, look, I'm not railing technology. I love technology. I love staying connected that way. There's good in that. But it can open the floodgates of awareness. And pretty soon you're aware of so many issues all around the world and so many issues just down your street and in your neighborhood that it can become so overwhelming you just want to shut it all out. And you just shut down. And you say, I'm not going to do anything. And some of you are there because you logged a bunch of time over here trying to do everything for everyone. And then you got to a place where you're like, man, I don't want to do anything for anyone because I need to shut it all out. And what Paul is saying is, look, if you try to take it all on, you're going to bury yourself. And if you try to shut it all out, you're going to just have this callous heart, and you're not going to live out of the grace and the joy. Remember the question from last week? Where did all your joy go? You're not going to live out of that joy. And so in verse 10, he gives us an insight, I think, to what does it mean to not grow weary in doing good. In verse 10, here's what he says. He says, don't grow weary in doing good. Therefore, what's it there for? Well, it's answering the question right before. So here's what it's there for. As we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. He's saying, look, as you have opportunity, you do good. Don't grow weary. Don't try to do everything for everyone. Don't try to shut it all out and just close down and unplug. Don't grow weary. I know you're facing opposition. As you have opportunity. The interesting thing in Greek is literally there are two different words for time. So as you have time might be another way to read this. As you have time. One is chronos, which is chronological. It's your watch. It's how things unfold. Another one is kairos. Kairos is this idea of opportunity, this idea of season. We are in the Diamondbacks baseball season. That is a good season, friends. That's the season that's upon us. And what Paul is saying is, like, you might have seasons here and opportunities and moments that come your way. And as they come your way, you exercise responding and doing good. And you do good for people around you, and you do good for those that you're already mutually connected to in the family of God. You respond. Don't spend all of your energy trying to be everything for everyone. But don't also just shut down because you're overwhelmed. You continue to do good as you have opportunity. As you're led by the Spirit, as you're guided by the Spirit, you go after the things that he's asking you to do. And maybe the simple principle that would help us get our arms around that. Paul, what do you mean by that? Is simply this. You ready? This is what I want you to take with you. You do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. You do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Because the role here is I'm going to keep in step with the Spirit, which is going to look different for you than it is for me. It's going to look different for you up in the back row than it is for me. It's going to look different for you than it is for me. It's not a list. It's not a rule. It's a rule thing. This is relational in nature. And as the Spirit leads you around, as he gives you opportunity, you respond and you do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And you don't have to get beat up by guilt anymore, trying to do everything for everyone. You can simply say, I'm going to do for one what I wish I could do for everyone. Well, Jack, that's not fair. Yeah, you're right. That's not fair. And in our culture, we really like fairness. In fact, we kind of grow up with that idea, that notion of fairness. Remember third grade? You got your cafeteria tray, and you go through the line, right? Get to the end, give them your card, go sit down, you eat with your friends. But it's Wednesday. It's brownie day. And you look at your plate and the crumbs, just a couple of them left, and you lick it. And you look back up at the line. and you walk to Miss Hairnet Lady. And you say, Miss Hairnet Lady, you are beautiful and stunning today. It is brownie day. It is a great day. May I have another one, please? Because mom always told you to say please. Please. And what does she say to you? Well, if I gave you one, I'd have to give everyone one. And what are you thinking in that moment? No. No, you don't. I am the only one standing here right now. I ditched my friends for a brownie. Oh, Hairnut Lady, you are studying today. May I have another brownie? Shh, I won't tell anybody. You don't tell anybody, we'll be okay. And that's what you're thinking. It's not about fairness, but we grow up thinking it is. Think of birthday parties today. Everybody gets a goodie bag. I didn't have goodie bags when I grew up. I think I turned out okay, but everybody gets one. And we have extras. We had a birthday party, and it's for Callie, and a little kid comes up and says, can I have another cupcake? And I'm looking at the cupcakes, there are 4 of them, there's like 20 kids. I'm like, there's not a, and I found myself going, this is what my dad would say. And I was like, sure, here. Eat it fast. Because I'm going, why do I have to be fair? I don't have to be. I can abandon fairness. This is not about fairness. This is about staying engaged. And as you keep in step with the Spirit, as the Spirit leads you, and as you have opportunity, you respond. And you step into that. And maybe a couple different things to frame that out a little bit more for you. You do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Say it with me. You do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. To frame that out a little bit more, I want you to think a couple other things, okay? One is think long-term and short-term. As you're doing for one what you wish you could do for everyone, I want you to think long-term and short-term. There's going to be simple moments in the course of your day, in the course of this next week, where you're going to say, I don't want to become weary. I can't do everything for everyone, but I'm going to do something for someone. And I don't know what that is, so Spirit, you lead me, and as I have opportunity, I'm going to respond. And it may be a simple short-term thing, and it may be a long-term thing. It may be short-term in the sense of just helping a neighbor. And the neighbor's kind of moving a rock in their yard. And you're like, well, I got a shovel. I can do that. So you go and you help move rock. That's how I met my neighbor, Matt. And we had a great relationship. And it's this notion of just stepping into those most short-term moments. I was at Taylor's baseball practice a couple weeks ago. And there's another student there that shows up. I hadn't seen him there before. And when it's in between innings, and it's hot, and we're out there. And I see him carrying this painting. And I'm assuming that he's painted this in art class, and it's in between innings, and I'm going to go get a drink, and I pass by him, and no one's talking to him, no one's around him, and I strike up a conversation. I'm an extrovert, I do that. And so I'm just like, hey, what's your name? How you doing? Did you paint that? And he's like, yeah. And I said, well, tell me about it. And for the next 25 minutes, I heard about every inch and thought and theme from this painting. And at the end of the conversation, I was able to say, man, I had no idea. That's amazing. God has put a passion in you to create. That's awesome what he did. It really was an incredible painting. And I just encourage him in that. And I see sweat beads going down his head because I know I'm sweating. I'm like, I'm going to get an EG. Do you want one? And I just buy them. It cost me $1.25. Here's the interesting thing. I thought nothing more about it until his dad stops me a couple days ago, stops us and says, you have no idea what that conversation meant to my son. You have no idea. For a week and a half, he has been talking about this, and it stirred things in him that he's just come alive. I just asked him about a painting. It was a short-term thing, and I walked away. But friends, you never know when you do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. how God is going to unfold that and use that in their life. You do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Sometimes it's long term. I remember being as a youth pastor here, and just we had a family that was in our youth group, and just a struggling single mom, had a rough backdrop to life. And I remember Amy and I just kind of saying, the best we know how, they will always be on our radar screen. I don't know what that's going to look like, but we're going to always keep them on our radar of just having conversations here or there, just trying to be encouraging with them. And over a long, like a decade, long time, we became known of some needs that they had in their house, and we were able to meet that need, and we did it anonymously. We didn't want the credit, and we said, hey, we just want to do that, and we did that, and we just said, this family, we're going to do something for this family. And their kids, they made some rough decisions and went sideways a little bit, and it hurt. And there was a moment a few weeks ago watching her youngest son take a step toward Jesus. And that was worth everything. It was just like, I can't believe I got to see that. And it's because I serve a God who says from time to time, as you do for one what you wish you could do for everyone, I'm going to give you a sneak peek. And sometimes it'll be a short-term thing, and sometimes it'll be a long-term thing, but I'm at work behind the scenes. As you just live in this grace that I've given you, you didn't earn it, just let that overflow. Maybe a second thing, real simply, is so you think long-term, short-term, and give time, not just money. When you're young, you got a lot of time. When you're older, your time becomes really valuable, doesn't it? You got more money, maybe, and you're able to respond. But here's the truth. If this is about relationships, money doesn't buy that. Money can help in certain scenarios, in certain situations. It can help propel people forward a little bit. But if this is relational in nature, and the strength is of you being used by the Spirit to imprint your life onto someone else and to help them relationally, there's only one commodity that does that, and that's time. Time is the most valuable thing you can give someone. And so give your time. And so can you do that for everyone? No, you can't. Some of you have been trying. Can I just set you at ease? Stop. Just stop. You don't have to do everything for everyone. But you can do something for someone. You do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And as you do that, as the person in your row who's your brother and sister, as they do that, and as the person at the end of the row, your brother and sister, as they do that, and as we do that for one another, guess what happens? A lot of good stuff happens. When we all live with the principle, I'm going to do for one what I wish I could do for everyone. And we're all in on that. As you have opportunity. So in an individual sense, Paul's saying, as you have opportunity this week, respond to that. As we, as a church, have opportunity to respond, because that's a corporate thing too. And we did that this last December, didn't we? The Christmas shoe drive. We said, hey, there's some Title I Marina Unified School District students that are struggling. They don't have shoes. And that was an opportunity that came before this church. And we said, that's not okay. And so the best we knew how, we kind of said, hey, let's all rally together to do this. And it wasn't one person that made that happen. It was 95% of us saying, I could buy one pair of shoes. And we brought that. And we made a difference. 1,400 pairs of shoes to students that don't have to worry about that for the rest of the school year. And we did that together. And there will be other opportunities, because as God makes an opportunity, we'll respond to that as a group. But see, as you have opportunity individually, you seize those moments to do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Here's what I do know. If you don't do anything, there's nothing to measure. It's zero. If you try to do it all, you know what it'll end up being? 0. Because you'll spread yourself a mile wide and an inch deep, and it won't help. But if you do for one what you wish you could do for everyone, it will make a difference, and it might possibly change the world. It will definitely change their world. So you do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Now, before I pray and close our morning, I just want to invite us into just a little sacred space, just a minute of saying, God, we've been looking in Galatians for the last 4 weeks. No way to get through all of it, but there's some significant things that maybe you've heard. And so I just want to invite you, maybe just in the stillness of your chair, just close your eyes if you want, if it helps you think, and just take 60 seconds to say, God, what's the one thing out of this Galatians series that I need to awaken to? You heard Glenn talk about that earlier, that we would awaken to live this kind of life that we're invited to have. So I just want to give you space to do that. God, what's that one thing for each one of us individually? Maybe for you, it's grace, 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 freedom, freedom, freedom. Because you've been trying to live up to something, and you're tired of failing, and you're just about ready to quit. And the Spirit would say to you, don't give up. Just rest. Maybe it's this identity that you belong. You belong to Him, the creator of the heavens and the earth. You belong here in this family. He's placed you here. Maybe it's just to keep rooted and to let the nourishment of God's Spirit just kind of make its way through you, that you just overflow with His grace and His love and His hope. Maybe you're tired today. It's just like, God, I don't want to grow weary anymore. I don't want to shut everything out, and I don't want to keep living with this burden of trying to take everything on. So, Father, I pray for my friends, for us, that we would be a people individually who take this truth that you're trying to anchor into our life, and that it would truly propel us forward. That you'd make us a people that live mutually connected and accountable to one another. That you give us the strength individually to pursue you as we follow you. And God, this week, as we have opportunity, as you steer that across our path, would you give us the strength and the wisdom and the joy of just responding to that, to unwrap that in that moment. I ask that in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen. Friends, we'll start a new series next week. Fun to be with you. Grace and peace to you.